Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, wherever you are in the world. And welcome back to another C Squared podcast recap. We have game 13 of the World Championship match between Jan Nepomniachtchi from Russia against Ding Liren from China. It has been just simply an explosive match so far. And as we are entering the championship rounds, the last two rounds of the World Championship match, before a potential tiebreaks, well, we were expecting fireworks. What did we get today, Fabi? You've been in the heat of the battle. You've been doing some interesting commentary, quoting some Final Fantasy moments. Tell us a bit about today's work.
Yeah, I don't know how to describe the game today. Let's just get into the moves. It was
Why
at
not?
least quite an interesting game. So e4, Jan coming off this painful defeat with the white pieces. We were speculating will he try to even play for a win today because we saw how tragically he lost the previous game. That being said, the score is still tied. He probably realized that even though yesterday was a disaster, there's still the match situation is not a disaster. So he stuck to his guns. E4, E5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castle, bishop to e7,
Mm-hmm.
e marshal,
We've
invitation to the
seen
marshal.
we've seen this discussion previously as well. Bishop to c6 was one of the moves. D3. So
Three
let's
times
see
we
what
saw
he
this in this match
chose.
so far.
Yes.
This was the fourth time. And once he took on c6,
Mm-hmm.
twice he played d3, and this was the third time that he played d3.
Yes.
b5, bishop b3, castle, sorry, d6 that is.
Mm-hmm.
And now he played c3 for the second time in the match. In their previous game, he had played a3, knight a5, bishop a2, c5, knight c3, bishop e6, and bishop g5. And you guys can check out our recap of that game. White got some advantage, but eventually the game ended in a draw.
Mm-hmm. And
And so
surely
he played
Ding
c3.
was ready for this because he did suffer in that game a little bit. We've mentioned it quite a few times. Jan had a good opportunity to play for a very stable and long advantage with the move queen to e2. You can check that in our previous games recap. Surely he was ready for that. Jan decided to be the first one to deviate from that game.
Yeah, so he played a move which he had played earlier in the match, but it was quite a bit earlier. Fifth game, he won with the move c3.
Mm-hmm.
Castle and h3. It's a modern system, and we already spoke about that variation in the recap to that game, so um, I don't think there's any point in going into the early details of like what black can do here again, since we've
Mm-hmm.
already covered it. Ding played bishop b7 again, like in the fifth game, and now a new move, both from the point of view of this match between these players and also kind of a new idea. Jan played the move bishop to e3. An unusual place to develop the bishop in these structures. Usually white plays rook to e1, knight d2, knight f1, knight g3, this maneuver. In the previous game, Jan played a4. Bishop to e3 is a rare move, and in my view, kind of a silly move.
Mm.
I don't say this, like when he played it, I thought there would be some idea, but with the benefit of hindsight, it doesn't look like this move came with some special prep.
Mm-hmm.
After bishop
Mm-hmm.
e3, Ding played the most natural way, knight a5, bishop c2 to preserve the bishop pair, c5, gaining center, gaining space in the center, very typical manner of play. Knight bdt2 is played, again developing, and rook t8, and this was I felt was the most natural move during the game. I kind of said, okay, rook t8 feels most natural. Knight c6 is also natural, but I don't see the problem with knight c6. I also don't see the problem with rook e8 as he played.
Mm-hmm.
a4, Jan played. Again,
And
white can
you've said something quite interesting. You said that this bishop to e3 is a silly move, and you feel like this was not some well thought particular preparation. And I think Peter Heine, the coach of Magnus Carlsen, also made quite an intriguing point. He said that at this point in the match, you just simply ran out of opening ideas a long time ago. At this point, you're just like, as a player, as you know, a potential world champion, you're just telling your team, hey, Just give me something that I can, take my opponent out of theory with. It doesn't matter whether it is. He framed it a different way, but he gave a basketball metaphor. But just give me the ball, give me something, and then I'll just play and try to do something with that. Tell us a bit about your experience in the World Championship match towards the end, towards those last few games. Was it similar to what we're seeing in this one, or was it in any way, shape, or form different?
I think we have discussed this a little bit before as well. It was just a different time, and you could kind of press someone in a line a lot more than you can now. Because, for example, we pressed Magnus in the 95 line, and because the opening was so complex to analyze, we just kept kind of pushing and pushing in that direction. These days, you can't push in one direction because the computers are so strong; they quite quickly tell you the answer. And ideas, usually people search for ideas in multiple directions. They're not trying to go down one path like was customary. We saw world championship matches in the past. People generally tend to press down one weak point, or they continue going, trying to find either the weakness in the repertoire or trying to hammer down this one line which they feel is difficult for their opponent. These days you can't do that. That's why these players are mixing up so much, playing everything under the sun. That being said, even if you're completely out of ideas, I still think bishop e3 is not a good idea, even in those circumstances.
Mm, okay,
Of
makes
course,
perfect
of course, they're
sense.
out of ideas, but
Yeah.
this one it is not even challenging because Ding like almost instantly played rook to e8. A4 was played. Jan's still in preparation, and the point is, if bishop to f8, maybe white can consider here bishop to g5, pinning the knight, h6, bishop h4, and the pin is a bit annoying to deal with. But instead, Ding played the move h6, and again, in our commentary, without the benefit of engines, I just said like, okay, you play rook e8, and then you play h6 to avoid bishop g5. And I don't know if this is the right way to play, but it's certainly the most natural one.
Yeah.
After this, Jan started to think. So it's like, yeah, I mean, kind of your opponent plays the most natural moves, also the first line of the engine, which equalizes and is not even particularly difficult to find. And you don't really have any ideas after that.
Hmm.
That's why I say bishop e3 is silly, just for those reasons.
Yeah. 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 And I guess
Here,
this
Jan,
kind of agrees to the point that Peter Heine was making. Most likely, you will get just a normal middle game position, and then the better player is going to do something with the resources they have at their disposal.
I feel like there was better tries in these complex middle games than bishop e3, because this one is very specifically kind of boxing you into one idea, which is to achieve d4 with white.
Hmm.
Because if black gets two moves, bishop f8 and d5, the bishop on e3 is actually misplaced. So, for example, rook e1, bishop f8, knight f1, d5. The standard development is just giving black a very comfortable position because
Yeah.
your bishop is on e3. It should be after d5. It actually gets in the way with being on e3.
Yeah. No, that
So
makes
that's
perfect
why
sense.
Jan played d4, but he should have probably included ab5, ab5. Now d4. Trade everything on d4. Knight takes d4. Knight to c4. Rook takes a8. Queen takes a8. Knight c4, bc4. We see the same type of position in the game, but crucially, the difference here is that after f3, white has some bishop to a4 ideas. It makes it a much better version for white compared to the game, but still an equal position.
Yeah.
At this point, I don't think white's really fighting for an advantage, but he should have done this and tried to press a little bit, a tiny bit more pleasant for white, arguably, although I think it's pretty much equal.
Yeah.
Instead, he played d4 immediately, traded everything on d4, and now knight c4. Excellent move. Knight takes c4. I think there's an argument to be made for taking on b5 here. Knight takes e3, f takes e3, a b5. And I think it's very difficult to make this decision, but white's knight on d4 can come into f5, and it's an interesting idea. And white is not better, but perhaps already he should have been considering things like this to just equalize.
Yeah. Yeah. And
After
again, I
knight
think this
c4,
is very much a psychology question, right? Because any sort of imbalances, with an engine, it's easy for us to speculate and easy for us to assess the position. But in the heat of the battle, with so much tension and so much pressure as we are, in the championship rounds, it's difficult to allow this type of imbalances to arise on the board willingly.
Yeah, for sure. It was not an easy decision. And that's why Jan took on c4. And here he made an objective mistake, but it's the most natural move. He played f3. There was, I think, if he had dug deep into the essence of position, he could have found the move queen to e2. If you take on e4, white takes on c4, which is probably a good outcome for white. And after rook c8, f3, bishop to f8, white plays bishop f2 and actually has the idea of d5 playing e5. And I still like black's position more, but he would have avoided the difficulties he had in the game.
Yeah, this
He
is so
played f3
so
immediately.
much better.
Bishop to f8 was played, and now black is going to achieve d5, and it's pretty much impossible to stop this idea. And the problem is that you're down the e file, your bishop on e3 is misplaced. Black has a better position. We were thinking about a5 here, and it was an interesting move. Black would play d5, bishop to a4. So white is attacking the rook on e8, and if it moves, then white has knight c6 ideas. Robert has pointed out this exchange sacrifice, d takes e4, bishop e8, queen e8. And complex exchange sacrifice, black is probably better, but white is probably equalizing with accurate play. And I think that maybe Jan should have gone for this.
Mm-hmm.
It was a more combative way.
Yeah.
Instead, he played bishop to f2, d5 came, ed5 is forced, knight takes d5. Black is threatening knight e3. Also, there's knight to f4 ideas. Black is definitely just better in this position.
Yeah.
There is no downside to black's position, just more active pieces. Knight on d5 excellently placed. e3 square weakness. Rook on e8 more active than white's rooks. And that's why Jan played bishop to e4 here. Just to stop knight e3 and knight f4 ideas and to pin the knight to black's bishop.
Mm-hmm.
And here, Dink had an excellent move, rook to b8. And yeah, white just is under a lot of annoying pressure. I don't know how bad it is necessarily, but black is better. Instead, Ding made a very weird move, rook to e5.
Rook to b8 also feels like a very natural move, right? You just played bishop to e4, pinning the knight on d5. The easy and the very natural response is to defend that bishop on b7. Not only that, but you're also focused on the one big weakness in white's position, the backward pawn on b2, right?
I actually have a feeling that both players were thinking that white would play knight e2 after rook b8. And they thought that more or less that maybe white was equalizing this way, perhaps. I think that it's still unpleasant for white. There's ideas like queen to a5 followed by putting a rook on d8. There's other ideas, knight to b4, but maybe knight b4 is leading to a lot of exchanges. I think that this is an explanation for rook e5, but still, you can play rook b8. It's a safe move. Rook e5 ends up being maybe very deep, but also very artificial.
Yeah.
Now rook c1 was played. Rook c8, and Jan played knight e2. This is the kind of idea we were talking about. And I think this is why Ding played rook e5. He wanted to answer this move with playing some kind of queen to the e file, which is what he played. The thing is, he could have played queen to e8 here, and that was quite dangerous for white. And the point is that the bishop on f8 stays open. So if you play queen d4, like in the game, there's bishop c5. Things like this. I'm not sure if black is like really better after queen e8, but certainly he was keeping the pressure up with this move instead of the move he played, which was the move queen to e7. And after queen to e7, the bishop on f8 is blocked off. And it's refuted. Okay, refuted is a strong word, but the problem with this move is queen d4. And I think Ding missed this. I think he even said it in the press conference. He missed this move. But to my eye, queen e7 was very unnatural, very artificial, and it's not surprising that white has a good response to the move.
Yeah.
Now rook takes e4 is threatened, so that's why Ding played f5. f5 is forcing bishop g3. And bishop g3 is forcing exchange sac. So when he played f5, he was going down this exchange sacrifice path.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not forced, but f5 is definitely a very interesting move. Bishop g3. Rook takes e4. I think fe4 was also interesting. And would have been met maybe by queen takes e5, queen e5, bishop e5. And similar exchange tactics in the game. just a slightly different version, a bit more concrete. Black would be down a pawn compared to the game, but would get some extra activity. For example, e takes f3, and if rook takes f3, there's rook to e8, things like this.
Yeah.
Instead, Ding played rook takes e4, fe4, queen e4, fe4. And black is down in exchange for a pawn. But the knight on d5 is a super powerful piece. It's very often coming to b4 and d3. If the knights were traded off, white would be much better. But with the knights on the board, it is probably objectively close to equal, although white is the one who presses here. So definitely it's been a success for Jan that he went from a worse position to a slightly better one.
Yeah.
But that being said, objectively speaking, black is probably doing all right. Rook f to d1 was played, a move which Tanya suggested. It looks like a very natural move. We were also considering knight to c3. Knight c3 could be met by, for example, a check on c5, king to h2, and knight to b4. Very typical idea, put the knight on d3, right in the heart of white's camp.
Yeah.
Where it attacks b2, it attacks the rook, and it blocks off white's rooks from having access to a lot of critical squares.
Any fun on the d5?
So rook f1 was played to
d9.
activate the rook. Yeah, rook f1, excellent move. Here I think Robert was suggesting, not in the commentary, but like in the break, he suggested to me the move bishop to e7. Interesting idea to get the bishop to f6 or g5, but it wasn't played by Ding. Instead, he played knight to b4. Knight to d3 coming into the heart of the position. Very logical move, and we were discussing this. We were worried that it was very risky for black because of what Jan played. Rook to d7, attacking the bishop. First, Ding gave a check. He could have also started with bishop c6, but he gives a check on c5. King to h2 is force. Bishop c6. This would be really great for black to force the rook back. But there's the move rook to c7. Creating rooks by force.
At this point, I was looking at the position. I was taking into the account the trend of the game, you know, from being much worse and visually and understandably for both players, much worse in the middle game for Jan to a better position. Almost risk-free. Sure, there's still some risks, but in general, with such limited amount of material, with an exchange up, you can at some point, even if you get in some sort of dangers because you lose the pawn on b2, for example, you can still pull the brakes and make a draw. At least from a psychological perspective, I felt like everything was going into Jan's direction, and I was starting to get a bit worried for Ding. Were you guys feeling more or less the same in the commentary booth?
We kind of felt when he traded rooks that white should be better. But when we got to this position, we didn't see the path forward for white. And I think Jan played the most logical move here, knight to c3. And this would be winning if bishop c6, knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, rook takes c4, and white won crucial 2 pawns because you will drop one of these bishops and you will lose the game. It's completely dead for black here.
Yep.
And that's why after knight c3, there's absolutely critical move, knight to d3. So if knight takes d5, knight takes c1, here black is up a pawn. Of course, white does not want that, so the rook has to move, rook c2. Now the bishop dropped back to c6. And now, of course, knight takes e4, bishop e4, rook c4. It does not attack the bishop on c5, bishop d5, and rook c3, bishop e4. It's probably still a draw, but there's no reason for white to go for this piece sacrifice.
After rook to c4, can I go just bishop to g6, or?
Yeah, you can. I guess it's. I mean, well, obviously, white should never go for this, but probably you try to prepare b4 and you probably make a draw here, just because limited material and pawn rook for 2 pieces very close to material balance. So
that makes sense.
But of course, white would never go from a better position to a worse one.
Yeah.
Jan played a move which I liked a lot. I was actually calling for this before it was played. I was attracted to the idea when I first spotted it. A5. Getting this pawn off a vulnerable light square, putting it on a square where it supports the move bishop to b6. King to f7 was played. And now, after king f7, white had an interesting idea here, which would lead to possibly an advantage, but hard to say. Knight to e2. The point is that after bishop d5, now white plays knight to f4. And with the king on g8, black could play bishop to f7. Asking white, please take on d3, it'll give me an even more advanced passed pawn.
Yeah.
Here the bishop has nowhere to turn to without dropping the c pawn. So black is kind of obligated to take on f4, bishop f4, And of course, the pawn on e4 is much weaker than it would be on d3. And the trade of knights is favorable for white. That being said, it's probably still a draw. And we were discussing this position a bit after king to e6, for example. We weren't sure if white is actually better here, but I think it would have been a safe try to at least keep pressing a bit. By the way, after king e6, we were kind of considering the move b3. And do you
Can
see
you
why
take on
b3 loses?
can you take on b3?
But then rook c5, b2, bishop, sorry, rook to c1, and white saves the game like this.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
But after b3, black does have a winning move. It took us a little bit of time to spot the move. We were helped, of course, by the val bar, which said b3.
Maybe g5?
G5 is super strong, and b takes c4. G takes
Then I
f4,
can take on
c d5,
f4. Yeah.
king d5. And it's a bit surprising. If white's king was on e2, white would be better. If white's king was
Yes.
on f1, white would be better.
Yes.
With the king on h2, it's actually trapped. A king cannot get back. If you move your g pawn, you allow
f3.
basically g3, f3. The connected pass pawns will promote. If you make a waiting move, let's say king to h1, of course here black has time to find some way forward.
But you
But
can
you can even
even
play
go
e3,
right?
king g1, e2, rook takes c5, king f2, king b4, king takes e2, king a5, and by a single tempo, white is too late. King f3, king b4, king f4, a5. If white's pawn was on g4, it would be fine, h4, and white would be in time. But here, g4, a4, h4, a3, g5, take, a2. White needs to play g7 to make a draw, but it's not in
He's
time.
too late. He's too late. One move too late.
Of course,
Wow.
this is not at all relevant to the game position, but just a funny line I wanted to point out.
No, it's a great line. Yeah. No, 92 definitely, even though maybe practically wouldn't pose a lot of problems, I think just the psychological aspect of exchanging that beautiful knight for black on d3 would be a clear victory for Jan.
Yeah, I think it would be a good outcome, but still I would put a draw within like the 90% range.
Yeah. Yeah.
But instead Jan played rook e2. This move is inviting the move knight to c1. Ding played it, rook to e1, rook to c2 would repeat the position. Rook to e1, knight d3.
Mm-hmm.
He has nothing better than repeating because the rook has to stay in contact with the b2 pawn, and it's also attacked. So rook to e2 is played and a repetition. Here we were interested in the move instead of repeating with knight c1, because Jan started to think. Ding started to think, and we were interested if black plays king to e6.
Okay.
Very fighting option. And if knight takes e4, bishop e4, rook e4, king d5, rook to e2, bishop d4, and the really active centralized king on d5. It's essentially like black is playing with an extra piece because the king on h2 is not participating in the same way as the king on d5. King e6 is a move which keeps the valuation level and keeps the game going, but objectively it is not
It's
not
still
like
within
black is better.
the margins of a draw. And I think Ding even mentioned something along the lines after king to d5 in the press conference. He was saying that rook to e8 was the move that he was calculating. Rook to e8,
Yeah,
knight takes b2, and now rook to d8 check. And he was saying that he just simply couldn't see any way to continue.
Yeah, actually, he's completely correct. After rook d8, king to e4, rook to
And
e8,
just rook to e8
king
check
d5, and it's a draw. It would just be an interesting way to continue, but like 99%, it still leads to a draw.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's actually a very good sign for him that he not only spotted the resource, he thought about it for a bit, he evaluated it correctly, and he decided to end the game with knight c1. The thing is, knight c1 doesn't fully end the game because white can play rook c2, knight d3, and knight e2, reverting to that other line. So yeah, maybe king e6 was a bit safer, but at that point, it was clear from just how Jan was looking at Ding that he was like, okay, let's make a draw. I'm ready. You're ready. Let's go.
Yeah.
And they made a draw, and that was the end of the game.
Yeah, no, fighting draw, definitely a roller coaster of emotions throughout the game and for the viewers as well, because, seeing Jan after such a hard loss because this was probably the most difficult moment. Game 12 was the most difficult moment for Jan in the whole match. You are leading, you have 3 games to go. If you keep the advantage, you become the world champion. The dream of every single chess player out there. And your dream is being swept from underneath you, right? With that horrendous loss. I mean, that move f5, I don't think he's made such a mistake. Maybe not in his career, but at least in the last decade or more. A move such as f5, a terrible move. And then you have to come back from that. You get a worse position out of the opening with the white pieces. You must be feeling pretty down at that point. And I think you mentioned it in the broadcast as well. If Ding would have played the move rook to b8, you felt like this could go wrong very quickly for Nepo. He could start tilting. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, it was definitely a dangerous moment from the opening, and just the way that he effortlessly was getting outplayed from the opening. Dink wasn't even making difficult moves or anything, just getting a good position with black without any work done. It was a bit of a worrying sign for Jan, but it looked like he started to regain control of the game. Overall, I think it's a neutral game. It's good for Ding in the sense that, the last 2 days have been perfect. He won with the white pieces from a losing position. He drew with the black pieces. It's good in some sense for Jan because, of course, yesterday was a disaster, and today he kind of righted the ship a little bit. Not too much, but he stopped the bleeding. So a little bit of neutral, or maybe even good for both guys. We have one more game until potentially the playoff. Tomorrow will be a rest day. After that, we have the final classical game. It will 100% be the final classical game. It may even be the final game of the match, but there's a very high likelihood that we will see a rapid chess playoff, which will be completely random, up in the air, toss-up event. Anything could happen between those two guys. I do want to say before we sign off that f5 was a tragic blunder in the World Championship match. But there have been a lot of blunders, even worse ones than that. And I think we'll put a list of some of the worst blunders in World Championship history, just to give some context to that. This is not unprecedented. I'll mention Kasparov blundered horribly against Karpov. He just basically gave a rook away for nothing in a World Championship match. Sevilla 1987, I remember this game, like tremendous blunder from a player as strong as Kasparov, arguably the greatest of all time, along with Magnus and Bobby Fischer. And he even won that match, but still he basically blundered the game in one move horribly. Along with that, I would say there's been a blunder, if we go back in time, to Steinitz, Chigorin, very
18,
famous.
How much is that? 1840 or something like that?
Not the 1840s, but let me
19?
think, 1896. I'm not actually 100% sure.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of throwing something out there. But yeah, it was a long time ago, over
Yep.
100 years ago. And last game of the match, I think Chigorin was behind, but a win would tie the match, if I'm remembering correctly. He blunders a mate in a winning position up a piece for nothing. He blunders mate in 3. Like, he's up a piece for nothing. I guess we'll link these games in the description to show how the very best in the world can do things like this. And
Look, you
another
gave me a
example,
great idea right now. I think we should probably make a video out of this and show the people these tremendous blunders in the World Championship history.
yeah, maybe we could do something tomorrow. We'll see how
It's a
how we're
rest day
feeling.
tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Fabi, very insightful as usual. Tomorrow is a rest day. Don't forget, guys, after tomorrow, we're going to have the final match. You might actually be on your own with a recap on that one. We'll see about that because I'm playing a tournament. I'm playing the Grand Prix in Bucharest on Saturday, but that should definitely be an interesting one. Your official prediction, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned that you expect somewhat of a quiet game. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the likelihood is a quiet game and a rapid playoff. But the good news is, even if we get a quiet game, even if there's no fireworks in the last classical game, there has to be a result in the rapid, and there will probably be some fireworks as well. I think it's 4 rapid games. and potentially after that, I need to check the regulations, but I'm pretty sure 4 rapid games, best of 4, and then potentially if it's tied, going on to Blitz, potentially going on to Armageddon. Um, I'll check the regulations on that one, but we'll definitely see some excitement at the end of this match, and in the next 3 days, even potentially sooner, we will see a new world champion.
Absolutely. Very exciting stuff. Once again, guys, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate your support, and I hope you have been enjoying the recaps that we've been putting on this channel. If you did, please don't forget subscribe, like the channel, join the member zone, all the good stuff. Cheers, and we will see you in the next video.
See you guys next time.